hear about.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks, Lynn. That's really useful. And some of that, when it comes, so what we're going to do is actually Shawnee is going to speak first on recruitment, and then I'm going to speak about retention, and we're going to open up for questions. And some of those more industry-wide questions may be more appropriate for either Patty or Michelle to answer. So we're going to kind of rope them into being available for answering questions as well. Right, so Tim, are you there? No. Sigi, how do I pronounce, is it Sigi or Sigi?
It's Siggy, yeah.
Sigi, hi.
I'm the founder of International Timber Frames, so I have the same issues that Lynn just mentioned. So she does the office work for us here, and yeah, I just can agree what she's just said.
Okay, thanks. Right, so then there's still Kim, and then I think we'll get, oh no, and then Di. Yes, Kim.
Hi.
Where are you based? Yeah.
Sorry, I was on a call. I missed everything. Yeah, I'm Kim. I work for Bonaparte First Nation. I work as a HR coordinator, and I've actually been mentored by Patty for the last 2 or 3 months. She's our HR consultant, so I've learned a lot. And yeah, I look forward to learning more about the hiring process today.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Kim. Right, and then is it Di? Ona?
Hello, yes, I'm based in Kamloops, and I'm just updating myself to understand current situation.
Mm-hmm.
My interest is mostly what is the motivation for people, like especially for the newer, younger age, that compared to our time, I think it's changed. So that's maybe what I'm interested.
Good, great. Okay, so, and then there's a screen sharing at Pan Abode International. Is there a person behind that?
Yeah, there is. Hi, it's Kelly. So I think for us, maybe we're a little bit different because we're located in the Lower Mainland. So the groups that we're kind of competing for some of our roles are very diverse. And we're actually in the last little bit recently having struggled, people no-showing. So just not responding to phone interviews. They get, have the phone interview, sounds okay. We invite them for an in-person interview and then they ghost us, I think is the term that we get done. Honestly, I've done recruiting for probably 20 years now, and I've never experienced so much of that. So, you know, there's that I'm kind of dealing with. And, you know, I think some of the general sort of echoing what other people are saying about just, you know, finding the right people and kind of weeding through a lot of applications for some roles, and then other roles we barely get any applications. So yeah, things are a little bit different depending on which role and which position we're hiring.
Okay, yeah, that whole thing of ghosting, I'm hearing that quite a lot from quite a lot of people, where they're getting a lot of applicants, but people just not showing up. And the suspicion is it might have to do with just working the system, showing that they are applying for jobs and then staying on EI. Because it's not the same limitations on EI at the moment with the CERB being rolled into that. So that may be more of an industry-wide thing that, you know, chambers of commerce and so on can try and canvass the government for. But
I think it's right, being able to hide behind a screen. People are so much more able to hide behind a screen and not pick up the phone or respond to an email, right?
Oh, I'm pretty persistent. I call and, you know, I email, I'll text them and stuff, but at some point, yeah, they're not responsible people to work with either, right? Like, it, you know, it comes to that where it's like, okay, you've, yeah.
Okay, so Michelle, do you maybe want to give a little bit more context on who we are and why you chose to invite us to speak, and then we'll go into it.
So when we started planning these seminars, HR was, I think, the key administrative issue they touched on. So much of what we focus on with educating our industry members is around technologies and equipment and tools and techniques around the actual structures and buildings and components that they do themselves, not so much the administrative part of it. But HR was something, when we did our surveying, that people requested to hear more information about. So when we have been trying to find someone, and myself and Patty even considered doing it ourselves because of our HR background, we thought it made more sense to reach out externally to people that are actively working in the field. So we did send out a couple of feelers, but I found, Jill, you were super responsive, and the fact that you really went and looked for other people to assist you with this, like Shawnee with LoveHR, and you really spoke to, I think, the issues that our members are looking to address. So yeah, so Shawnee's going to present first, and she's going to be touching on recruitment, and then that'll segue into Jill, who will be discussing retention. And like Jill said initially, they are not part of the same company, but they do work together, collaborating on different things. So I think it'll go well. And I don't know if you would like to do questions briefly after Shawnee does, or if you would like to go right away after and then just have questions at the very end, or just kind of play it by ear.
Yeah, we had planned that we would do we would do both presentations and save questions for the end.
Okay, perfect.
Just because sometimes, yeah, just then people have the complete picture, and the interdependence between the two would be better.
Okay, yeah. So I will turn it over to Shawnee, and we'll go from there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So just a quick thing before Shawnee takes over is that while Shawnee's presenting, she actually can't see you or read the chat. So if you have any things that you want clarified, if you throw them in the chat, or if you get my attention, I will raise Shawnee's attention. So you can wave or put up your hand using the Zoom things or anything, and I'll let Shawnee know that somebody would like to speak to her.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thanks. Can everyone hear me? Yes, good. Okay. So yeah, I'm here to talk about how to be more creative about the recruiting that you've been going through. It sounds like actually you've got a lot of expertise around the room today. So you are actively engaged in this, just as I am. I'm going to start out by setting lower expectations. I think it is the worst job market I have seen in my 30 years of doing this kind of work. For sure, like as it relates to candidate pool, it's the toughest. And we were talking a bit before this session started that, you know, in 10, 15 years ago, the BC government in particular, paid consultants to do a whole bunch of research on, where the job market was going as it related to candidate pools, supply of candidates. And they predicted 12 years ago that we would have a job shortage around 2020. And then of course, that was only exacerbated by COVID and CERB. And so, the pain that you're feeling is real, and it is not just your industry, it's completely universal. My consulting practice, we work across industry. I always say we're industry agnostic, but every single industry is feeling this. And what that means is you're not only competing for candidates from, as I think you suggested, from each other, which you don't really want to do. You're actually competing against industries that you never knew you would be competing against before. That makes it hard. And at the same time, that's the reality that we live in. So, I look at my job as, trying to create maybe some different approaches that will get you noticed, or, help you be more efficient in your processing of candidates so that you can get ahead of the game. So with that being said, I'm going to jump right in here and roll through the presentation I have for you. And I do, yes, it's good to have the whole full picture, but if there is something that you need a quick clarification, please do speak up and stop me, because it's sometimes can be distracting to wait till the end. So let's see here. Hopefully my slide we'll move. There we go. So for today, what I want to talk about is I just want to do a brief overview of what is recruiting. Sometimes there's some confusion about what all is entailed. I'll talk through a process because I do follow a process. I kind of trust the process that will result in the outcomes that I need. So we'll talk about what that looks like. We'll go through the 4 recruiting methods that exist, the big 4, and then I'll spend a little bit of time at the end of my portion talking about employment branding. And I'll talk about employment branding as an individual organization, but I also think there is a big opportunity industry-wide to work as a team, to come together, to collaborate, to try and market your brand, just like, you know, your various tourism associations for the different cities would market all the hospitality, you know, organizations in their town. The industry can help with this. No pressure, by the way, there, Michelle, but this is something that I feel like, you know, the industries are increasingly having to play a role in recruiting. It's not as simple as just having, you know, lone organizations. And I do think that there's economies of scale coming together. So even if as an industry, you can't get everyone on the same page, maybe 5 of you in a town will work together on this and, you know, pool your resources. And I think increasingly as smaller organizations, which are, you know, who I work with, if we aren't working together and kind of pulling together with other groups, we're losing out to the big employers, the ones who really do have the horsepower behind them. So, you know, we can be more nimble than them, but to a certain extent, you know, there's strength in numbers. So with that being said, I'll start off with what is recruiting. And really, it's about how you attract and screen through the candidates, ultimately how you select them and how you bring them on board. And, you know, one of the things that I know from, you know, again, doing this work is that candidates that join your organization are flight risks for the first year. So really, it's not just that you know, process of getting a whole bunch of resumes into your intake system. It's also about all the steps that you take along this process, including those first few weeks and months on the job that are really part of that recruitment process. And I encourage you to think about recruiting in that context. It's not just, oh, we have you know, a signed offer, we're done here. That role or that responsibility continues. When I think about, you know, choosing the right approaches for recruiting, it all starts with following this process, which means being really clear about your recruiting needs. And I have people often nod at this point and say, oh, we know our recruiting needs. These are the skills that you need. But actually, I go beyond that. As I said, I work across industry, but regardless, I always say there's 3 pieces to every single job that you need to be clear on before you begin recruiting. The first one is, of course, you know, what does it take to be capable to do that job? Today, capable, or within, let's say, 3 to 4 months, 6 months perhaps. What kinds of skills, what kinds of abilities, what knowledge, what background, all of those kinds of things, that's one aspect to the job. And it's an important one, but it's definitely not where we should stop. And I think a lot of employers, they have a job description, it lists out all those key skills, key experiences, and that's what they send out to the market. But I encourage you to take it a step further. I think about the next 2 pieces as being equally important. One is, what kind of drive or motivation for doing this kind of work are you looking for? And I think, Di, you touched on this, saying, you know, what are the motivations of people? You know, I take this even a step beforehand. What kind of motivations do you need people to have in order to work in your organization? And, you know, the classic example I give as a you know, sort of different frame of looking at this is McDonald's. Lots of youth go through working at McDonald's. McDonald's, their entire hiring approach is hire lots and lots of young people and put them through their paces with the full expectation that the majority of them are not going to make 3 months. And of those that make 3 months, an even smaller percentage will make 6 months. And they basically are a training ground for all these other employers that exist out in the marketplace. And they know that. But it means by, you know, bringing in 50 people and only expecting that 1 out of that 50 are going to make manager one day, they've stopped investing the same way that an organization that says we only want 1 and we want to grow them from the beginning to the end of their career. And, you know, I have a client that, you know, if you want to be the general manager, you have to start in the warehouse. basically that's how they've been, built their entire recruitment model. And so really understanding where you land on that and being clear if you are one of those organizations that requires somebody to grow from within or apprentice, that you're looking for a different type of person or a different type of group of people, and frankly it changes where you're going to recruit. You'll be looking for different ones than maybe somebody next door that is very much the McDonald's approach, where we don't need people to be craftsmen, we only need them to come in and basically labor through these various activities. And I think it's important to note, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who said it now, but it does depend on the job. Certainly as organizations, we can build a general approach and have a philosophy around this, but job specific, sort of calibration does need to happen. So we said, the capability, we talked about the motivations that we need and in how we want to navigate people to navigate working with us. And then the last big part that is part absolutely of how you decide to recruit is the fit. And when I think about fit, I'm thinking not just with the job, like, is it dirty and hard work, or is it a clean office job? Is it 9 to 5, or is it on call? I'm not just thinking about that kind of fit. I'm also thinking about how does it fit working in the team? How does it fit working in the organization in general? And being really intentional about those things. And that's a really hard thing to do because I know we're all pressed for time. The one thing about the fit piece is when you start defining that for your company and teams, it can cascade through multiple jobs. So while you're investing up front, you can carry that information through. But I'll tell you, when I draft job descriptions, let's say, I include that kind of information in it. And of course, when I'm drafting postings, which are part of my hiring process often, but not always, I would be thinking about some of those kinds of things intentionally. Do we have a question? Oh no, someone's just chatting. Thank you. That my chat just popped up on my screen randomly, so I took it, but I'll stop doing that. Okay, so defining your recruiting needs, being really clear about that is the place to start. It's an investment up front. It does take time, but what I've observed is if you're using that shotgun approach and you're just shooting a whole bunch of ads or bullets out there, chances are you get the randomness that comes back to you. If you spend the time up front, well, it takes a bit more time, you can be really laser focused in where you're going. So the next part of this is, and of course my screen is freezing up on me here. Let's see, there we go, is how we advertise and source candidates. And I'm going to talk about the 4 mechanisms to do that after this, but let's just be sort of as an overarching review that how you choose to source your candidates depends significantly on the work you did defining them. So for example, and if you are going to look for laborers who are brand spanking new to the industry, you would have a very different approach for sourcing and the activities involved in the screening process than you would if you're looking for a very seasoned practitioner. I think that's probably fairly obvious for most of you. Then when we get to screening candidates, part of you're balancing, and I always say there's a kind of a middle ground here. You're balancing what you need to assess in order to determine whether the person is going to be right for you. And full disclosure, you're never going to be perfect. We do our best. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had a couple complete misses where I was so wrong, I couldn't believe it. And I thought, wow, live and learn. I've been doing this so long. How do you make a mistake like that? You do better the next time, hopefully. So it's not a perfect science. But when it comes to screening candidates, being really intentional on how you're going to assess what is absolutely critical. So for example, I have, a moving company. One of their screening methods is to take their candidates out to a field and to run them through some physical activities. That's actually part of it. And they do that because being physical is a really important part of the job. And if the person can't run up a set of stairs without being winded, they're never going to make being able to do this kind of work. Of course, if you're, in an admin position, it's easy to do a typing test or a word test, but, being intentional about in your industry, how you screen them beyond the, the interview conversation, maybe spending a bit of time going out for lunch, but really thinking about how do we assess capability, motivation, and fit in our organization and bringing candidates in. And again, I think about this kind of stuff. I'm planning this before I ever put pen to paper and put anything out there into the marketplace. And then last but not least, of course, is the selection and hiring process. And one of the things I will mention, I can't remember, I think it was at Panabode, you said that talked about, getting ghosted. To me, this process of sourcing, screening, and selecting has to be faster than we have ever done it before. You need to be running through this process so quick because candidates are getting snapped up literally within the day. That doesn't mean that they're getting snapped up by employers that they're going to fit with, but there is a lot of desperation out there because the supply is so limited. You know yourself, right? If all you have is one loaf of bread on the shelf and there's 100 people going in to buy that loaf of bread, you're going to take it, even if it isn't the kind you want. And that's what we're seeing in the marketplace. So that's where I'm a big advocate for planning up front, figuring out really in depth what you want to do before you ever get out there into market. And then once you've got everything set up, once you go to market, you're flying through this. You're doing this so that a candidate literally applies and they're getting a call within 24 hours if you think they're viable, and then that process is ready to move. And to me, that's part of how we navigate this successfully in this marketplace, because we are truly, it is a war for talent. I checked end of September, there were 65,000 jobs unfilled in BC. And that's all industries, granted, it's not just yours, but 65,000 jobs, that's significant. That if nothing else, if that doesn't light a fire under your process, right? And I hate to say it, this is where I say I'm kind of setting low expectations because I don't have a magic pill. I'm just being really honest about what we're up against. This is the toughest market, and we have to be, more clever than our competitors. And our competitors aren't here around this room. They're every hiring organization. So what I'm going to do now, I talked to you earlier about defining your needs, advertising, sourcing as one of the steps, screening and selecting. This is the process you're going to follow. But I want to spend some time talking about the 4 methods of actually sourcing. The first, and it's very simple. It's hunt, fish, farm, and mine. Okay, so hunting is really the one that is, I would say, increasingly in use now. We're going out there and we're direct targeting, just like you would going into the woods. You've got your license for deer, you're going off, you know where deer live, and you're going after that particular animal. You're going in the place they go, you're going probably the time of day, and you're using the tools that is going to get you this animal. It's the same with recruiting. Where does your type of person land? Do you know them already? Does somebody in your employ know them already? I hope when you're looking for candidates, you're letting all of your employees know that you're looking. And, part of a hunting strategy can be to have an employee referral process where, I have clients right now, if an employee brings a craftsman to the table, $2,000 to $5,000 cash bonus the second that person starts is going out the door to the person who referred them. That's beyond the signing bonus for the person getting hired, but it's this referral program where we're getting our employees to be our best ambassadors and bringing candidates forward to us. So hunting can be great for seasoned candidates. It's a much more labor intensive process. You would use tools like Facebook or LinkedIn potentially. You can go on through Indeed sometimes, but it's also through industry associations. You're looking in other provinces. You're going after them directly and intentionally. Fish. The next one, this is the most common one. This is the one everyone thinks of. You cast a wide net through your advertising and you see which fish bite and hopefully reel one in. And fishing is, everybody's doing this. So how do you set yourself apart? We're going to talk a bit about that on the employment brand side. But when it comes to fishing, again, you're not going to go fishing for trout in a saltwater pond or saltwater location. So same thing, being intentional about where your typical candidate, ideal candidate, just possible candidates come from. And that's where you want to be advertising. And of course, you want to be advertising in a fashion that's going to attract them. Just like your lure has to suit your fish, so does your ad. And that's a really important piece of this, because, you know, a lot of people, I've seen ads, and I look at what my clients' competitors are advertising in the marketplace, and you see some really unappealing ads, unappealing from a candidate perspective, because they basically say, hey, we're hiring, you know, join us, these are your duties, here's how you apply. And it's certainly functional, but it doesn't lure a candidate to you the way the organizations that are getting ahead of this are. And, you know, by luring, I talk about, okay, what's in it for you? What do you get if you work here? Increasingly, if you do have good wages or competitive wages, I'm advertising wages for my clients, because candidates need to know that they're going to make more working for you than on SERB. You definitely want to talk about giving them very clear, easy instructions for how to apply and what they might get if they work with you. And of course, and Jill's going to talk a lot more about the motivations that people are looking for, but, you know, some of the obvious things that it's table stakes. You have to have them in order to even play this game. Good wages, certainly some kind of benefit program. If you have an RRSP, something to think about as you're investing in them long term. But the other thing you really want to be able to show, especially for your younger workers, a career trajectory. And for your more seasoned workers, you want to show stability and that you care for them. So this can be threaded in your ad. And it needs to be part of that, right? They need to understand that this is what they're going to get if they're going to come to you. Again, that lure that you're advertising. So we've done hunt, we've done fish, now farm. Farm is, I think, as you might guess, it's growing from within. And so, you know, looking at every single person in your organization and having a conversation about what they want to be in 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. Do they see a path with you? This is an investment of time, absolutely. It's a very time-consuming process. On the other hand, if you can grow someone from within, you get a loyal employee, a known entity, you know what to expect from them. And oftentimes, as you're growing those people, you know, I worked with someone once before who had been with this employer that we were both employed by for like almost 12 years. And it was a tough job that he was doing at the time. And I said to him, you know, have you never thought about leaving? And he looked at me and he said, are you kidding? I change jobs every single year, because every single year my employer is giving me a new challenge, something exciting and new to learn, and I'm progressing in my career just here. I don't have to go anywhere else. Now, not everybody's like that, and I certainly know that millennials have a reputation for job hunting or job hopping, and in truth, they do hop a lot, more than you know, their older predecessors. At the same time, there's more jobs than people, so they can hop around and go for, you know, the best offer that they hear. Seeing a trajectory for them, a career path, is what will keep them. And Jill's going to talk more about that. And then last is mine. And, you know, this is in particular for organizations that hire people into apprenticeship type roles where they, you know, they progress from a very entry level up to craftsperson or artisan type level. And to me, you know, the way you do that is you get into the high schools or younger, but you start making some kind of family-friendly model in your community that talks about and teaches these young people about joining your industry. And, you know, I encourage you to be going to the colleges, going to the various trade organizations where they're teaching these young people. Make friends with your unions. I know that's kind of a dirty word sometimes for entrepreneurial organizations, but, you know, starting to invest in these relationships really is going out and finding these diamonds in the rough and then bringing them back to your organization. If they hear about you 3, 4, 5 times as they're going through high school and college, who do you think they're going to look to when they're first, you know, looking for their first job? And, you know, you don't have to bring in a whole bunch of them. Sometimes that's pretty overwhelming, but bringing in a couple and having that pipeline and showing career progression, they attract people like them. And that's a hard part for our industries too, because if you have a lot of, you know, gray hairs, well, mine's died now, but gray hairs like me out there, it's not appealing to young people. So hunt, fish, farm, and mine, those are the 4 strategies. And again, you would obviously ideally be using all of those organizationally, but in any given position, you might choose to weight more heavily into one or the other. And then the last place I'm going to go before I turn this over to Jill is just talking about how to be an attractive brand. And I'm talking about this externally in the marketplace. A lot of us are so busy working in our businesses, we don't stop and think, how are we perceived by the market? The reality is that our brand in the market, plus our candidates' experience as they go through the recruitment process, is what impacts our candidate pipeline. And of course, you don't want to build the well when you're already thirsty. So you want to be working on this all the time. I joke around that, you know, the ABCs of recruiting is always be collecting. If you're at Starbucks and you meet somebody with a really good personality and you think, hey, you could fit in my industry, give them your business card. If you're at a networking event, if you're traveling, if you're out there, use your social media, use your own personality, and incentivize your employees to help you with that. As it relates to being an attractive brand, younger people do appreciate technology. Something like 70% of millennials check out a company online via social media and your website before they will consider applying. So you really do need to have a great website that will enable them to learn about your company and see what it is you have to offer. And keep in mind, when you're an attractive brand, you aren't just talking about your job or your company. You're also talking about the place where you work. And so, look around you and think about, for those of you in Williams Lake, you think, oh, well, how do we get people to come here? But there are people, over the entire country and around the world who would just, be thrilled to get the opportunity to live in a place like you have. So you do have to spend some time marketing your own organization's location as well if you're going to attract from other places. Build your reputation. I think that goes without saying that you want to be investing, ongoing over your social media. You want to be, sharing information as an industry expert, talking about the cool things you're doing, the cool technologies, the various different types of approaches and things that people can learn. Learning is very appealing to young people. You want to promote belonging. I can't emphasize enough. This is the two things that I get candidates asking me about nowadays for employers that I work with are, where do they land on diversity and inclusion, and what are their feelings about the whole climate change? Are they contributing to the community, the carbon neutral, the green energy, or not? And how are they doing on being inclusive? And these are top of mind. So how you're doing on that front, if you have a really good reputation for that, both of those areas, that is something you should absolutely be showcasing online. And then demonstrating your community mindedness. If you're working in your community and you're donating to kids soccer and you're donating, you're marching in the various different activities and events, if they see you in the community, they being candidates will have a better impression of you. And again, part of this is just giving them the sense that they know who you are and that they can trust you as a brand, because trust is at an all-time low. If they can trust you as an employer and trust your organization, and they know people who work with you who enjoy it, you are going to get the pick of your community. And then beyond that, if you don't have those things, how are you ever going to get reach across, the entire collection of candidates that are potentially in your pool nationwide? That actually brings me to the end of my presentation, and I apologize for the gallop, but I think I've even taken too much time, so I will turn it over to Jill.
Okay, so let me just, there we go. Now my slideshow is working, and I will get it up on share screen. There we go. Just got to adjust all my windows here so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so yeah, that was great, Shawnee, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions afterwards. So really, employee retention. As Shawnee said, there's a strong interdependency between retention and recruitment. So a good place to start when we're looking at employee retention is what causes people to leave. And what I'd like you to do is think of the last 2 or 3 people that have left, and just in the chat, type in just briefly, what are some of the main reasons you're seeing for why people are leaving? And maybe you don't know. So if everyone can just simultaneously just type into the chat, and we can begin to get a sense of what people are seeing as the reasons, given reasons. And it could be that you're having to fire people, it could be so family members not settling in the community. Great. And that speaks to what Shawnee said about you know, the importance of making sure that people understand what your region has to offer. Okay, better job offer. I know when we first came to Canada, and my husband is a doctor, he had to go work really up north, and he basically said, look, if my wife's not happy, I'm not staying. And so, you know, for a lot of people, that is the case, especially with dual career families, but generally paying attention to and making sure people know what the region offers. So more manageable workload, more money, less physical labor. So maybe a couple of other people throw in some ideas of what they're seeing.
I don't know if I can say, Jill, but the big one I hear when I do exit interviews is bad management. Like their bosses make promises and don't follow through, or they're unrealistic, or they don't teach. Like it's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah,
and people quit bad managers, not bad jobs a lot of the time.
Yeah. So lack of interest in the job, not feeling fulfilled in their role. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, a great place to look is, you know, these are anecdotal things, and you know, some of these things we have control over, and some we don't. So let's have a look at. There's a survey done in 2019, which is probably a more accurate representation anyway than 2020, because let's face it, 2020. Any statistics from last year are not going to be typical of any year. So what's interesting about this one, I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse. Can you see the mouse? No? Yes, no.
We can.
Okay, great, thanks. So you'll see that the less preventable ones, the ones over which you actually really have very little control, are a much smaller percentage than the ones over which you do have control. So things like, as Shawnee was saying, people really wanting a career development, and we'll talk a little bit, these ones over which you have more control, the more preventable ones, I'm going to talk a little bit more about them and how, you know, options that you can, options for addressing them. So this really is, so this is statistics done by the Work Institute in 2019. Looking, and so these are the percentage of people who left in 2019 and the reasons given for why they left. One interesting thing is compensation and benefits. Notice that it's less than 10% of the reason why people leave. And typically, it is often seen as a primary reason, and often people will quote that as the reason. It's just like if you're trying to sell something, when you're selling to clients, they'll say, oh, it's too expensive, but that's not really the real reason. If there's enough value, they'll spend the money. And it's the same in jobs. If people are satisfied and they've got enough sense of purpose and fulfillment, really, you need to be paying fair market wage. You don't need to be paying at the top. But as Shawnee said as well, you need to be clear on what is the value, unique value that we have, and how do you market that? How do you brand yourself for that so that you're attracting the right people? Now, an important part of any retention strategy is the good old exit interview. Now, my experience is that even large organizations, mid to large organizations, often don't conduct exit interviews. Even if they have a process or policy in place, they're not usually very good about it. And the smaller the organization, especially when there's time pressure, it's even harder to do. I don't know if any of you do have exit interviews. It's not something that I do for clients, but it is something that Shawnee at LoveHR does with clients. They will help design the questions, because the questions you ask inform the answer you get. For example, if if your best friend or girlfriend's just had a haircut or bought a new dress, and they say, I think it's great. What do you think? Do you like it? What are you going to say? Or the infamous one, do I look fat in this dress? How many people say yes? So the question you ask affects the answer you get. Saying I'm moving for better, moving for more money, it's an easy, safe answer. And there's probably validity to it. I'm sure there's truth in it, but it's probably not the core underlying reason why people are leaving. So having a good exit interview doesn't have to be overly formal, doesn't have to be overly structured, but being very clear on asking and framing your questions in the right way. And asking the right questions is going to help you develop a database of information so that you can begin to recognize why people are leaving, and you can be strategic in addressing those areas. Okay, so as I said, the good news is that although turnover is fairly high at the moment relative to other times, a lot of the 77% of the reasons why people leave, you as an employer have some control over. But without that exit interview, you're not going to know why they're leaving. You're just going to get that easy, low-hanging fruit thing that it's because of money. But some of you have been saying other reasons as well. You do know some of the reasons. You know that it's around the people are finding that the labor is too hard. Maybe they don't like the region. So those are things that you can fix in the recruitment side of things, and they can be addressed. And once you fix those in how you attract people and where you go for people, for finding people, that will improve the fit and it will reduce your turnover. So the main causes of turnover that you have control over, of those, just a quick summary again here: career development. Now, career development, and I'll be digging into 4 of the main areas in more detail in a bit, but just high level overview here. Career development is not the same as promotional opportunities. It can be lateral, it can just be skill development, as long as the work. One of the main reasons you're asking about motivations for millennials, a huge motivation for millennials, more than in previous generations, is learning. They want to feel that they're growing and developing. So as long as there are growth and development opportunities, then you will keep them. In fact, in this research article, they say that there's been 170% increase in people since 2010. So in 9 years, 170% increase in lack of growth and development opportunities being given, as opposed to 45% decrease in people leaving because of lack of advancement or promotional opportunities. So let's not confuse. In small organizations, you often don't have opportunity to promote people, but you do have opportunity to provide growth and development for people. So work-life balance in your industry, I'm not sure how easy that is. Work-life balance isn't necessarily a lot of time off. It can be around flexibility. So scheduling flexibility is huge, and for millennials, very, very important. They want to be able to, my generation, if somebody asked to go and see their kids' hockey game, it would have been completely frowned on. Now it's frowned on by employees if employers don't understand why that's such a priority. Manager behavior was brought up as one of the reasons that Shawnee was saying a lot of people leave. It's well known in the HR industry that that's a core issue. And the issue is often because managers are not equipped. You know, when you move from being, people are often promoted for technical experience, they usually let go of because of behavioral things, not because of technical things. So whenever you're promoting people, make sure that they get training and that they're equipped. And one of the hardest components of moving from being an individual high achiever to a manager is, how do you deal with those difficult conversations? How do you address those conflict? People in general are very conflict averse. And let's face it, Canada has a reputation for being even more so. So as a nation, it's something that's even more important that managers are equipped to do. And that really does need mentorship and training. Otherwise, it's an unfair ask and it just increases their stress, the manager's stress as well. So then we get to compensation and benefits. And again, really you want to be paying what people see as fair market value. They just want to know that they are getting relative to their peers for the work that they're doing, that they are valued. Really around compensation, there's a certain amount where there's like, they want to have a fair living wage. And then beyond that, it's, am I valued by my employer? And so comp and benefits, as again, referring to what Shawnee said about if you're looking for people to attract people who are interested in a long-term career rather than the temporary piece, your benefits play in there. And having a look at like, what is my compensation range? And maybe I start here, but where do I move to? General well-being, it's pretty nebulous, but you know, people leave for all sorts of reasons. It's to do with work environment, it's to do with stress levels, it's to do with being seen as valued. Job characteristics, this is the, you know, making sure that people understand what is their work environment, what is the actual work that they're going to be doing. Is it work that is going to be enjoyable, fulfilling, where they feel that they can contribute and have a positive impact, where they can feel that they can take pride in what they're doing. And then work environment, again, we'll talk a bit more about that later, but work environment, it's the culture, it's the actual physical space, it's the people that you work with, it's what is tolerated. One of the two biggest reasons people left here in work environment was employee culture, poor fit, or problematic co-workers. And then the third reason was unsafe environment, so looking at safety. Okay, first year, again, Shawnee mentioned she's, you know, the first year is really important because that's when people leave. And this research backs that up. If we look here, 38% of people who left in 2019 were in their first year. And mostly in that first year, people leave, it's around job fit, it's around fit, culture fit, job characteristics, work environment, or work-life balance. Hey, this isn't actually what I signed up for. So a sense of that bait and switch that in marketing. Beyond in the 2 to 5 years and onwards, the main reason was around lack of career development opportunities. Again, not necessarily promotion. Probably once you get into the higher years, promotion may factor in a bit more, but 2 to 5 years, lack of career development opportunities, feeling like I'm going stale, jobs getting boring, I'm losing my marketability. So main causes of, again, looking at the main causes of turnover, just this is another graph just looking at the percentages within the days. And taking note that turnover is expensive. It's expensive in terms of time, your time, money, and energy. And if 43% of people quit within the first 90 days because of poor fit or job not matching expectations, then that's a huge amount of time, money, and energy that's been wasted. Now that, again, this is a general whole, and again, it's the US, so it's the whole of the US. But what is really important is that when you're recruiting, you communicate the details of the job accurately. And it's not only do you communicate details of job, schedule, pay, kind of what people can expect and what is expected of them. Another factor is really listening for what are their expectations. And, you know, millennials, I think, get a bit of a bad rap. If I think back to when I was in my early career, I moved around a fair bit because I wanted to get different experiences. So I don't know that that's that uncommon. What I think is, would I have moved as much if I could have had exposure and growth experience? Probably not as much. I still would have moved, but not as much. Probably would have halved the amount that I moved. If I listen to millennials nowadays, they're realistic, their expectations are somewhat unrealistic. However, when they get a clear path and a timeline, they're able to come on board. Or at least if that is communicated to them in the recruitment process, they know what they've signed up for. What is really important is that they're at choice and you're listening for what are their expectations and helping to right-size that. Another huge factor that contributes towards not losing people to retaining people is onboarding, orientation, initial training. And that onboarding is both, it's things like, do they have the tools that they need? Or do they arrive and they can't communicate with people? They don't have an email that, you know, so it's actual practical logistical things. It's also, can they connect with other people at work? My brother and sister-in-law just moved to Russia, and my brother-in-law is having a fantastic time in his new job, but my sister-in-law is hating hers because she's the only English speaker in her entire department, and so she's completely isolated. So she's looking to leave, and she's been there less than a month. So in what ways are your practices inclusive, where people are engaged, they're made to feel part of the team early on? So increasing employee retention requires a strategic approach. You know, you're business owners or you're working in businesses, and you heard about working in the business versus working on the business. Working in the business is doing what the business does. Working on the business is all those things that often, if you're a small business, end up on the side of your desk. And they need to be, employee retention needs to be seen as a core, prioritized as a critical component of sustained business success. Only when you see it as a critical aspect of your core business will you be able to find the time and the resources to do those exit interviews, to be able to gather the right information, to have employee surveys perhaps, which will enable you to hire for fit. Paying attention to the culture and investing in culture, people, processes. Sometimes it means bringing in external, you know, if you have internal HR, you can work with them. If you don't, maybe it's bringing in external consultants, people like Shawnee or myself, to facilitate you defining what is your culture, paying attention to what are the processes that are going to earn us a good employer brand. So, as I said, being strategic requires collecting the correct data and planning and investing in solutions. So flight risk. As you think, and you don't need to put this in the chat, but I want you just to think, do you know who is a potential flight risk in your team at the moment? And what are the reasons they might be leaving? So always paying attention to who could potentially be a flight risk and planning around that. You know, in my business, I have a small team, and I'm paying attention to who is a flight risk and what factors in how, and my team is a remote team, so how do I keep them connected and belonging? And we've made some procedural changes to increase that sense of belonging and connection, and it has significantly reduced the flight risk. In fact, it's completely obliterated the flight risk for some of them. And there's one person who I knew was only going to be with us for a while, but because of those changes we've made, it's now looking like actually she's going to end up staying significantly longer. So pay attention to who could be a flight risk and what are the factors that might lead to them leaving, and what can you as an employer do. And remember, it's not always bending over backwards to meet the employee. It's sometimes just around relational connection and right-sizing expectations and creating clear timelines for things like career development. So what can you do in terms of career development? What kind of intentional feedback mechanisms do you have? Whether it's having intentional informal conversations, whether it's having regular meetings. For example, with my remote team, we started having regular meetings. Every second month, I have a meeting with each of my team where it's 40 minutes to an hour. And the whole purpose of the meeting is just for them to share what's going on. And inevitably, it increases our relational connection, increases their loyalty and their connection with the organization. It also inevitably, opportunities surface that, so I have no agenda for this meeting, and they often don't necessarily know what they want to talk about, but pretty much every time something shows up, which has been a frustration for them, and we're able to address it. If I didn't have those touch points, we wouldn't be able to address it. So understand, so what are your intentional feedback mechanisms, whether it's surveys, whether it's one-on-one meetings, whether it's informal going out for coffee, whether it's occasional, you know, beers after work. I've worked for organizations where one organization every Friday, they would have like 1 hour period where there would be coffee and cakes and stuff this was in a boardroom. It was a white collar environment, but you could do something different. You know, you can have, so that was them. Another organization I worked for in New Zealand, where they have a different approach around alcohol. There was Friday afternoon, actually another organization in South Africa also did this, a Friday afternoon drinks. And so anyone could show up and just connect with each other. And there would typically be a couple of managers around there to have informal communication with people, informal discussions, and people would have a couple of drinks and then they'd head off home. So that's part of an intentional feedback mechanism. Understanding fit. When you employ people, you may do some, I don't know whether or not you use assessments, behavioral assessments or job fit assessments, but they're available. Again, both Shawnee and I do those. But also in developing people, we all love to know ourselves better. And anytime I do behavioral assessments with teams where they get a better understanding of, oh, not everybody thinks the same way as I do, not everybody's wired the same way as I am. And it builds respect within the team, it builds respect and understanding from managers with their team and team with their managers. So that's an important part of it. Clear outline of requirements as to, if you want to progress, this is the kind of thing we want to see. So we believe in providing people with new opportunities. It could be stretch assignments. It could be a specific project or a temporary opportunity to step into management when somebody's away. But in order to do that, these are the things we need to see. And having regular discussions around people's career aspirations, around their and what that will look like, and co-designing that.
Jill, there's a question in the chat about stretch assignments, and maybe you could
Yes.
just define that briefly, if you
Okay.
don't mind.
So yeah, thanks. Stretch assignment. So a stretch assignment is something that somebody's not necessarily ready to do yet. They don't have all, they haven't done it. And they're probably not ready to do it. So they don't have the full competency, but you believe that they'll be able to step into it and they'll be able to grow into it. So you give them something to do that's beyond their current competence, and you make sure that there's enough support so that when they get stuck, they know who they can reach out to. Does that answer the question, Patty? Okay.
Yeah, she nodded her head.
Okay. Oh, sorry. As I say, I can't see people when I am presenting. So yeah, so part of that whole career development is opportunity to build skill. Pay attention to listen to your people, listen to what they are yearning for. Some people will be a lot more explicit about it. Others may need you to open up the door to hear and create opportunity for them to share. And that'll be a lot depending on, in this assessments, if you have behavioral assessments of your people, you know how they can communicate and who you maybe need to, who's just going to bang your door down to let you know, and who you need to maybe nudge a little and create more safety for them to express their desires. So I think, yeah, that's whole sense of belonging. I'm hearing a yearning, particularly from young men, for a place where they can feel proud to be connected with. You know, with all the changes and the pressures that millennials have with social media and likes and not likes, and being kind of judged at every turn, there's this longing that I'm hearing for people to be able to belong.
Oh, Jill,
And-
there's just a question. Are these future training hours need to be conducted in working hours? Do they need to be conducted in working hours or outside of it? Future training hours.
Future, so Di, maybe if you can unmute yourself and tell me a little bit more what you're curious about.
So all those things you talked about, giving opportunity to build the skills, you know, moving to the next level, these has to conduct within working hours. For example, if I can share my knowledge with crew,
Sure.
do I need to do that within working hours? You know, that's always a question that comes. If it's work related, I don't mind to do it in a working hours, you know.
So you mean like the mentoring, for example?
Yeah. And
Okay.
so if it is a job specific, you know, like a grading, you know, how to see the material and so on, I can see it's a work. But, you know, something like someone's interested for something that they're not really doing it, you know, but you said they're not ready, but for future. So those training, you know, how do we take?
I would, you know, so it really does depend on, it depends on a couple of things. One is your business's approach. The other is on whatever kind of union contract you may be subject to. So for things like mentorship, I have no problem making that available to, you know, as long as there is no union contract restricting you, you can design and say part of promotion, this is an opportunity which you can take advantage of, and it's going to be unpaid outside of, so it's like they're getting free education essentially.
Yeah.
So you can make that, you can decide as a company whether you want it to be paid hours or non-paid hours during working or not. For some of the things obviously are just part of work, and it's, you build it into how you work. But things like if somebody wants to, let's say you built in a a program where you are, you want people, you identify people, you invite people to identify themselves, and then you invite them into an opportunity where they can have a meal or go out for a drink and ask and have that more informal kind of mentorship program. Totally, you can do that outside of work and as unpaid. For my team, yeah.
I was just going to say, can I jump in with one
Yeah,
quick
please
example
do.
on this front?
Yeah.
So the tech industry, and I, again, different, like chalk and cheese, totally different industry, but they've employed exactly that strategy really effectively. Whether they do it online, which of course is natural for tech and works well in COVID, but I have a number of clients that have basically set up kind of like a informal, we're going to do a meetup every, third Wednesday of the month. And at that time, we're going to spend an hour or two or however long, and everyone's going to come together and we're going to talk about, this particular area of development. And they have started doing those. Not only is it great for developing their workers internally because they're collaborating, sharing information, but what they've allowed them to do is invite outsiders to come from other companies, arguably their competitors. But in doing so, you set up your brand as the expert, you're teaching and sharing, you're building a relationship and a rapport with people who are potentially your future hires as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I can't emphasize enough, I'm seconding what Jill says. One, it has to be allowable within the various terms of your union contract if you have it. And two, you have to make it clear, not mandatory, won't hold you back in your career if you opt not to come or can't come regularly. Purely voluntary, but putting it out there, if people want to come and take advantage of it and they can, I love doing that. That's best kind of branding you can do for your business, and that sense of building community as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it can't be, promotion can't be conditional on it, but it does become a, that drive and motivation. It shows who is interested, right? So you don't want to be punishing people if they're not coming. So with my team, all of our team meetings are, we are a little different, right? Because we are a consulting company. So people are used to dealing with, it's a different system, but there's an expectation that if they come and work with us, that they get themselves upskilled in their own time on our unique offerings. So, and also that our team meetings and those one-on-one meetings, I'm not paying them for that time. That's for their advantage, and it's going to put them in a better position to be able to get more work and to do things. So if you present it as this is an opportunity, you're giving to them free, and it's not going to cost you anything other than your time. It's reasonable. So just quickly finally on career development, really, really important, especially with your millennials. They're impatient. And if they've been there 3 months and they don't see that there's any opportunity, they will leave. So you don't have to give them that opportunity straight away. They do need to see the clear path, and whatever path and timeline you've given them, they need to be able to, you need to follow through on that. And if anything causes a delay, you need to communicate that it is delayed. And again, it's not that, there's some right sizing of expectations of career advancement. It's not like you're going to be here in 6 months and you're going to be the main project lead. This is what is required to become a project lead. How are you? How are you moving forward? They just want to see forward movement or growth. And you just need to be very explicit as to what the opportunities are and what is expected of them in order for them to take advantage of those opportunities. Okay, so equipping managers. Leaders often promoted because of technical ability, not necessarily because, and not necessarily because of their soft skills. As I said earlier, promoted for technical ability, fired for lack of behavioral ability. Investing in soft skills, what does that mean? Understanding team dynamics, understanding that people are different, understanding that how do you correct someone? If the only time you ever go and speak to someone is in order to correct them, they're going to hide, and they're going to think that you don't believe in them, that you don't value them. So if your leaders don't know that, there's the old school of, well, If you don't hear from me, it means you're doing well. Well, that doesn't really work anymore. You've got to let people know what they're doing well, how are they doing well, connect, have encouragement. Leaders need to be taught as to how to do both written and verbal communication. And the difference in communication when you're a leader to when you just appear, and how to handle difficult conversations. Really, really hard and unfair to expect them to do it unless they've had some equipping. Why is building trust important? What does it look like in their context? How do they go about developing those under them? What does it mean to behave ethically? Again, when you're a small business, it's tough to get the time, to get your people to have the time and to kind of commit the money to investing in your leadership and your leaders. It's going to pay back in spades. That employment brand, this is going to be huge in terms of building your good employer brand. It's the difference between, I have one client who, my son's studying engineering, and I'm like, Keith, you've got to apply there. They've got such a great culture. They've got such a great work environment. To another client from way back where I was just brought in to deal with conflict, and the organization just really wasn't wanting to deal with the conflict. Toxic environment. One of our good friends was looking to apply there. We said to him, don't. So the employment brand that you have, how you're known in the market, affects who's going to apply and how long they're going to stay. Job characteristics. Make sure that in your recruitment, you're not doing a bait and switch. Make sure that what you're recruiting for and in your interviews and how you present the company and what the job requires is actually what it is, so that you're attracting people who are going to love that work, because they're people who are going to love that work. Sorry, I'm just having, yeah, word does travel fast. Suggest specific providers of good management. Okay, well, obviously I'm going to suggest us because we're really good at it. And I can, sorry. Okay, yeah, so we are good at that. It's kind of a core of what we do is leadership development, and we have some great, we have a great emerging leader, middle leader, senior leader program. But so one of the, sorry, I just wanted to go, yeah, job characteristics. One of the things is task or role overload and limited resources where people feel poorly trained or they feel lack of empowerment. So when you think of job characteristics, it's not only the actual work, it's how equipped they are to do the work. Is it too much work? Do they love the work, but they're just getting overwhelmed? So how do you do that? Well, pay attention. If there is a period where people are overwhelmed with work and there's too much work, make sure that it's contained. Make sure you're communicating with people that this is unusual, we're going to have a break time. For example, in accounting, if you work for a public accounting firm, you know that in tax season you don't have a life, but you know you're going to have a life after that. So how do you compensate for that? How do you build flexibility in there where you've got a peak season and a season that's quieter, so where you can allow people to have more time off, and they know that when they're working really hard, they're going to get more time off. I think everything else in this is on the slide is pretty self-explanatory. Okay. Work environment, again, culture fit. Understanding what is your culture. What is it that people value about working there? What is it, like if I think of our culture, when I said to my team, we're going to grow our business, but not at the expense of our DNA, not at the expense of our work culture. And our culture is one that it's one that is life-giving. It's one that allows people to bring what they bring, where they're valued, where we have structures and we have processes, but they're processes that allow for unique expression. I recruit people for their unique strengths and their diverse approaches, and I want that to be able to come through. So what is your culture? What are the things that make your workplace a place where people want to stay? In work environment, work-life balance is a really, really important part of it. Schedule flexibility, safety, and then the whole thing of problematic employees. Anytime you allow a problem employee or somebody who is a bully or negative or overly critical or just a slacker, anytime that's not addressed, it impacts the overall work environment and it increases the flight risk of your good workers. So again, that is a really, really hard thing to do, and it's really important that you equip your managers with the skills to be able to do that. So what I call this correct or release. If there's ongoing bad behavior from someone, how do you engage with them to correct it? And if they're not going to correct it, then they need to be released from your employment. Okay, so question time. We're opening the floor. Di, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'll start. The last one you said, the correct or release. You know, I have one person in our company that we have been notified that some people are getting, you know, hard time from, and it's a girl, and but I just don't see how we can correct this, and I don't know how can we release her either. You know, there are 7 reasons that I cannot fire the people that I learned, you know, 15, 20 years ago. You know, I just can't find a reason to let her go. So how do you deal with these people?
Do you want me to speak to that?
Sure.
So in BC, the rules are you can let somebody go at any time for any reason if you are not in a unionized environment. So you have the right to let somebody go. The reality is you just have to pay, and the amount you have to pay depends upon the circumstances. Specifics you have to dig into. And I will say, I just had this conversation with a client this morning. Terminations are the most litigated aspect of employment. So, I've been doing this 30 years, and still every single one, I have a process I follow. I go back, I get all of the foundational questions answered, and then we strategize through it. And so that obviously can't be handled here today, but you absolutely can let go of somebody. What my bigger caution is that, and when I hear, I have organizations where we have mostly male dominated, and then we have 1 or 2 women working in it. When I hear, the woman is the problem, or pick your minority, the race is the person who's the other race is the problem, or the person who's gay is the problem. I often want to, before I get to the termination dialogue, want to spend a moment saying, okay, well, is there an opportunity here to maybe talk about sensitivity training and maybe some understanding of each other before we get to that place? It may well be that they truly are the problem, and I'm a fan of, cut line quick because you're investing too much time already. But I also think sometimes the person who's the problem for everybody else, we need to take a cautious step forward into, are there other solutions? And I agree with Jill, like correct and release. The correct part for me is there what it isn't always correcting the individual. Sometimes it's the team or
sometimes
the
it's correct the
process.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely, Shawnee. And so here's the thing. There's this little thing called management prerogative. And as long as you can prove, and so I've worked in a number of different countries, and in South Africa, in England, in New Zealand, and in Canada. So I'm assuming in most countries that if you can prove that it's management prerogative, then you can do almost anything. So in other words, if it's in the best interest of the business and it's for advancing and sustaining the business, you're allowed to do it. Obviously, as long as it's ethical. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be ethical, just has to be legal, but unfortunately. But then there are two sides to that. The one is it, so that in labor law, you always ask, is it substantively fair? So in other words, is there a fair reason? And then is it procedurally fair? So if management prerogative is all you need really for it to be substantively fair, but you need to make sure it's procedurally fair. So the way you go about it. So as Shawnee says, the procedures that you follow is really important. And either of those, if you've got both of those, you won't have to pay out. So if you do it properly, you won't have to pay out. You can fire somebody for just cause. And what Shawnee said is absolutely true, that often when I've heard, oh, there's a problem employee, there are other factors at play. So always starting out by looking at what is the overall system, what are, that this isn't happening in, and learning, even if in the end you get rid of that one employee, learning about, is there something in our culture? So for example, it could be that somebody is, somebody's cutting corners, somebody's like just flaunting the whole safety thing. Is that what in our culture allows that? Or it could be that we're picking on minorities. What in our culture allows that? Or it could be that we tolerating bullies. What in our culture allows that? So what in our processes and procedures, in our onboarding. So paying attention to the overall system, not just the individual. If in the end it's the individual that's the problem, making sure that you do begin a process of releasing that individual. But part of paying attention to the system is, if the system has been part of what's contributed to the way that they're behaving, then we need to give them, we need to, as leaders, as management, we need to correct the system and then enable them to change how they respond. Okay, so this chat is blowing up here with questions. So I'm just going to go back to, so Di, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So yes, you can get rid of them, but there's some steps beforehand. Yeah. So I'm just going to go back to Lynn's question while I was presenting around soft skills. We do offer some really fantastic soft skills programs. Shawnee, you also do some, I believe?
Yeah, I mean, most of the soft skill programs I would do are, we teach, for example, how to give good recognition, how to give a good performance review. I'm not a coach. I stay away from that. There are others who do that, like Jill and her team. I focus more on the sort of leadership management application skills. How do you, like I said, have those conversations around performance, goal setting, recognition, praise, etc.
So we do quite a lot of work around culture, around teams, around leadership. So probably what I'd advise is go check out our websites and see if there's anything there that resonates with you, and then ask, get hold of us. And if there's nothing there that connects with what you're looking for, then we can put on our thinking caps and recommend something else.
Just an aside, actually, Lynn, my company, I don't think you're aware, but the BCLTVI is actually one of my clients. My actual company,
Okay.
Le Francois Training Services, we do a variety of soft skills training, both conflict resolution, communication skills, and we also do a whole myriad of things, including team building. We do retreats. We do all of these type of organizational development activities at various levels, right from strategic planning sessions to departmental planning and development, all of those types of areas. So, and we also have a website you're welcome to have a look at.
There you go. Yeah. So yeah, we do all of that as well. So it's there are providers out there. It's just a case of finding the right provider, and you can start with the three of us here and take it from there.
There's also a whole bunch out there in the world, but just so you know.
So yeah, Michelle's comment here around where you have a person who's causing trouble, but their skill is so valued that it's hard to let them go. In the end, it's not worth it because of the cost. And so biting the bullet, those are hard decisions to make. They're
Especially
really
right
hard decisions to make. Sorry?
I always told them everybody is replaceable, but it's, you know, it's difficult right now to find people, you know, with the skills. And I think that that was their issue constantly, was finding people to fill those roles. But I think they would have had a way better time just training somebody up and decreasing their turnover.
Well, and
versus
exactly.
Toxic.
Because what happens in the end is it becomes hard to attract good talent because you have a reputation for not being a great place to work.
Tolerating poorness. I just want to jump on that note though. The other potential option is putting them in their own little island. So, I mean, it doesn't always work for every position, but there are some people who, you know, you just don't have them interact with anyone. They just do their thing in their own little island, and they can continue to deliver, and you know, you kind of have other people dealing with the social side of things. And that's, you know, I come from it, like, let's be practical. Right now we're trying to find solutions, and you have to serve your customers, right? So if you can put them, that's not my first choice. My first choice is to build a really strong culture. But if you have somebody who is like so critical and you can't do anything with them but keep them, find a way to mitigate the damage.
Yeah.
I-
So other
I-
questions?
One of the things that I have found has been really helpful, and one of the organizations I've worked with over the last couple of years is that we really had to, again, as you said, work on the cultural of the organization, but also work on the consistency through a revamping and redevelopment of their actual HR policies, and actually start applying them. Well, first of all, implement them, educate both staff and management, the supervisors, on implementation, applying them consistently and fairly across the board, and really having a solid progressive discipline policy in place. And that goes back to applying the process of progressive discipline, so that you're not faced with, if it does come down to the crunch and you actually do have to do a termination, you're not sitting there going, oh goodness, yes, I have the legal right to terminate for any reason, and how much is it going to cost me? Because as you say, if it goes to litigation, you then have to say, how much would this cost me if it goes to litigation, if I don't have all my ducks in a row to prove that I have a just cause? Because in litigation now, especially with the pandemic going on, there's a lot of constraints for somebody to actually get a job, particularly in their chosen field, if they have constraints against it. Yes, we have a ton of job openings, but there's other constraints that come into play. And a judge and the labor board looks at a variety of things for if you get litigated for unjust termination, if you're charged.
Yeah, so terminations termination should never be the first place you go, and it is complex. You do need to make sure that you have a valid reason, and that the person has been given opportunity to change, and that it has been fair in how it's been dealt with.
And if that's going for just cause, if you want to go with, hey, this just isn't working out, then you have to look at a fair and reasonable termination package.
Well, this just doesn't working out is just cause, because if you have, but you need to be very clear. It has to be, anyway, I don't want us to get sucked into this, because it is a complex thing. Just finally on that, you can release forfeit. However, you cannot release person A forfeit and then have person B and C stay. That's when it becomes unfair. So you do need to be consistent. Yeah.
Another tool that is very, very effective is actually having employment contracts with consistent clauses, with termination clauses in it that spell out.
Absolutely. And then you have to, so one important final thing on this, and then open up for questions again, is if you have a contract, but then your practice is different to your contract. Your practice overrides the contract.
That's
so
correct.
you need to make sure that you don't think, oh, well, you need to make sure that you don't think, oh, well, we've got that in the contract and we can always go back to that. And it doesn't matter whether or not we're consistent in applying it. As soon as the precedence always overrides contract. So
That's
just
right.
something to be aware of. Okay, what other questions do people have around retention and recruitment? Yeah, true, Lynn. Lynn's just... So communicating and implementing, I think a huge part of where recruitment and retention interact is that whole thing of what is communicated. Being clear on what it is, as Shawnee said, who you're wanting to attract. So there's quite a lot of thinking that has to happen. And realistic thinking, there's aspirational stuff, and then there's the where we're at now. And being clear that what you're communicating is a mixture of both. Because if all you're communicating is aspirational and it has no reflection of where you're at now, you're going to lose people. Shawnee.
I see a question out there about, can you be more specific about where to place ads? So I'll jump on that one. So we're fishing, right? So we're going into the market in the places where our candidates will be, and we're advertising there. To be honest, I don't know specifically, because it depends on your, who you're looking for, but I do encourage you to broaden your approach. I mean, traditionally you have to put it up on Indeed, because that's one of the ways that all the other websites pick up from Indeed. So you get a really broad reach from Indeed. You should also be putting it on WorkBC. WorkBC has a lot of connections with other websites. And again, your job will get picked up and shared beyond the reach that you have. You definitely want to make sure your employees know you're hiring and that they're sharing it on their social media and you're sharing it on your social media. And, this is an example again of, making sure you have the community of followers, and, if you're using, you have a lovely website that talks about your products and services and you have great followers, why would you not put up every now and then a job ad that says, hey, we're hiring, want to come join our team? Or if you're thinking about a job in this industry, here's some things you could do to prepare, and when you've done them, come talk to me. That kind of sort of building building the story as you go is important. The thing is depending on the job you're hiring for and the skill sets, there are various associations nationwide that you could be advertising on. Sometimes your industry, I know your industry does have a career site and is actually advertising it as well. So you want to put that there. Again, these are all online. But the other thing I think is there's nothing wrong with getting in front of the types of communities. So I don't mean community as in the city or the town. I mean communities online. So for example, I'm currently hiring, and again, it happens to be technology, but it's top of mind because it's quite a specialized interest area. I'm hiring for Drupal programmers. It's weird technology, weird language, programming language. Not everybody does it. So yeah, of course, I've advertised in all the places I just talked about, and a few others. We've gone and advertised at the colleges and universities where they teach computer programming. We've gone into the sort of, general cities where people who learn this skill might be, like Waterloo, for example, and advertised on community pages there. But the other thing we've done is a lot of people who program Drupal happen to play Dungeons and Dragons. We know that because everybody who codes Drupal in this company plays Dungeons and Dragons. So now we're advertising on Reddit, and we're advertising in the various meetups for Dungeons and Dragons, not for Drupal, not for Drupal communities, Dungeons and Dragons communities, because that's where those people hang out. So I envision the same thing. Perhaps you have people who, in your industry are avid hunters or snowmobilers or skiers or backcountry skiers. Go up to your local ski hill and plop a sign up, just like old school, when people are sitting around talking. If you have a particular community where a lot of your group members might be interested in, go find where those people hang out and advertise in that location. And again, that you have to kind of get in the mind of your quarry, like your big fish that you're trying to pull in.
And that really also, for places like Williams Lake, like the Caribou, what are the things that actually will attract people lifestyle wise to your area, and advertise in those kind of forums, because then it's like easier. You don't have to sell them on the region. They're really excited about that. So it's one less thing that you have to sell them on. Yeah. So there are three things really when you paying attention to building a good employment brand, building a good business. There's product. What is our product? Is it good? What are our processes? Are they good? And who are our people? And if you're not investing in all three of those and improving constantly in all three of those, it's going to negatively impact the sustainability and the growth potential of your business. So, you know, we often think of product as being primary. Product is, without a good product, you don't have a business. Without good people, though, you don't have a business. And processes, you can probably have a business with bad processes, but eventually it's going to impact your service and the kind of people you attract. So just thinking of it as what are the kind of due diligence, what's the kind of due diligence you put into your product? And how can you take that into how you attract and invest in people? Also thinking around your processes and your product. How is that actually something that's distinguishes you? Something that is going to attract people and cause them to, you know, because the processes, you know, you wouldn't market it as processes, but what are the wins of the processes that makes it nicer for people to work with you? For example, because I have a lot of coaches that work with me. Coaches are notorious. They're really people, and so they're really not admin and administrative people. And one of the things that I do, and one of the things that attracts people is I've invested a lot in back-end systems that reduces their admin and simplifies and streamlines all of that. One of the things in my industry, a lot of coaches, they are independent and they don't have that sense of team. So how I attract people is I say to them, we're not just going to provide you with work, we're going to be a team and a community. So identifying what are the key things that people in my industry are looking for, and then making sure I actually build that into my culture, that I retain that I build that into my processes to support the culture. And so for you guys, what do you like? What are the things, if you think of another great way of doing it is thinking of who are your best employees? Who are your best people? What are their attributes? What are their, and it's not only on their competence side, but what are their general attributes? And how do you design your job applications to attract more of those kind of people?
And if you're stuck on that, like I'd way rather do stay interviews than exit interviews. So talk to your good people about why they're staying. What do they love about you? And then, you know, go out and market that. These are the things we do well, and ask them, what are we not doing well that we need to work on in order to keep you here? And then, you know, it's like anything. It's just a continual improvement process. You're not going to knock it out of the park on everything the first day, but asking your people why they stay is a way better conversation than asking someone why they've left.
Yeah. And there's both the short game and the long game in this process. And if all you're ever doing is the short game, you're going to be doing it again and again and again. So doing right now, even if you have a skill shortage, asking yourself, okay, what capacity do I have to begin investing in the long game? Begin collecting that data, begin having more of these process like structural things of the meets with people, the asking those systemic issues. Systemic questions, sorry, it's not necessarily an issue, it could be a positive thing. So thinking about how am I actually spending time and energy and thought on, and money on both the short and the long game. Levi, you asked something around what motivates people. Maybe others can share, because as Shawnee said, there's a lot of expertise in the kind of chat room. So, or in the Zoom room, maybe others can share, what are you seeing motivates your best workers?
Sorry, that was for me?
I think so. You were asking, weren't you?
No, but
somebody else maybe asked. Maybe you can share.
What motivates our best workers? I think that you know, our best workers, they like the
sorry, it was the stable
working hours. You know, they like to be able to be part of the team, I suppose. Like, you know, we got one guy in particular. He's always the guy that wants to be the safety guy. He wants to be the training guy, and you know, just sitting back, you got to let these guys do the roles that they want to do if they're good at it, because if they enjoy what they're doing, they want to feel like they're part of the team or contributing some way, right? So
yeah,
I mean,
and that's that career development piece, right? If people have opportunity to, and they feel valued and trusted and invested in, or given opportunity to do the things that they love and to grow in them, you keep them.
I see some great examples coming in the chat too. Yeah, benefits and technology, right? You're up to date, good quality, well-maintained, safe, and being innovative. One of the questions that I often get asked, I don't know if it applies, but, or actually, I think, Michelle, you mentioned this too, that, you know, you're competing against the mines and the oil and gas where they can pay big dollars, right? And you know, I always say you can't compete. And in fact, it's a losing game. If you're trying to compete against people who are going to pay more, you're always going to find somebody willing to pay more. So, you know, while you can't afford to not pay fair, you don't want to chase that. But, you know, how do you compete? I think, you know, talk about some of the things that are showing up in the chat. Those are ways, but also remember, when you're going after people, spend some time talking to them about, you know, look, you can be home every night with your family. You don't have to go 3 weeks in, you know, you don't have to work 24/7. Candidly, that's a young man's game up there, right? Like, it burns you out. And a lot of people who go up there come home, you know, 5-10 years later, however long they make it, with, you know, a drug habit and no money to show for it. It's terrible to say, but the truth is it burns you out, and the lifestyle's tough. So, you know, you go after people who are, you know, maybe more savvy or have been up there and realize that, you know, they're not seeing their family anymore. But it does mean then you're not chasing the millennial, you're chasing the 35-year-old who's just about to buy a house and wants to be home to, you know, hunt fish with their kids. And that's a different advertising campaign than, and it's, frankly, it's different things you offer that person than the 20-year-old who just wants cash and maybe doesn't even want benefits. You know, like, I have lots of 20-year-olds that say, I don't care about extended health and dental. Don't give me that. Give me more money, you know, give me more time and more money. So, you know, again, it's really getting into why the people that you want to hire, why they want to work for you, and then trying to offer that. And there, you know, there isn't a magic formula for, you know, your particular industry. It's more what the types of people you want, what's magic for them. I just encourage the flexibility comes up over and over and over, right? Like, trying to find ways to say yes rather than, you know, this is the biggest thing I see in HR over the last 30 years. The biggest changes, it used to be we created a system and everybody went in the system. If you were a round peg and we had a square hole, you didn't fit. Now we're trying to find ways to be more organic and more flexible so that your round pegs, your square pegs, and your triangles can all fit into this very nice, flexible, bendy, organic thing. And you know, if that means, hey, the package for this job is $100,000, and whether you take it in cash, vacation benefits, or you take it in pure cash, or you take it in training and conferences and time off, like, really trying to be thoughtful about this as a bigger picture, because it isn't just money. For some people it is, though, right? You have to find the right currency for each person. And how do you find that? You ask.
Yeah, and you ask and you have flexibility. I mean, I think choice, if you want to remember one word, it's choice. That people, and again, if we're talking about millennials and what motivates millennials, but I think it's generally our society as well. It's society expects greater level of choice. And if you're not going to accommodate to some degree, okay, Jen says, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm thinking of people in the late 20s, 30s, but even early 20s, Gen Zs, they, the other thing with this group with the Gen Zs particularly is they're so used to getting stuff for free, because like apps and things online, why would I pay for it if I can get, like, software, they just get it for free. So the thought of paying for something and the thought of not having multiple choice that accommodates me, it's a different world that people have grown up in. And so they're looking for things for choice. And if you can show how choice is available within your organization, and again, not trying to be something you're not, being very clear about who you are and what your culture is. And that with this culture, these are the choices within it. With this environment, this is what you get from it. This is what you benefit from it. This is what you get to choose. And this is an expectation. In order to get this, this is the expectation. We mustn't, as employers, forget about that. That there's a personal ownership that people need to take and have personal accountability. So that whole thing of people don't want to work, there are people who do want to work. You've got to find people who like the kind of work, and you've got to be very clear on the value and the benefit that they're getting from working with you and from that extra that extra stuff that they put in. So that's again around that whole communication piece, and that communication, being very clear on that. That's not just having it in your recruitment or having it in a contract or even in a policy document. We remember that stuff when it's communicated almost organically. So equipping our leaders to your managers to what is part of what they're communicating, because they're on the ground and they hear when somebody's whining about something, and that's the best time for them to be able to say, yeah, that costs, validating, yeah, that costs, and that's part of the reason why we are such a good place to work. So that whole pride and sense of belonging to something that you can be proud about, that comes because we work so hard. That only comes when. So equipping, being clear on what you're all about, and equipping your leaders to not only have those hard conversations, but also to have those culture and vision and right-sizing, managing expectation conversations.
So one
Really
thing that I, not just by having those conversations, but by leading by example. So
yeah.
An issue I encountered was the constant pushback on when people would have their annual review and they ask for the raise and they get a cost of living raise. So they could jump ship and go to a new job and get 15% more as opposed to 2 or 3% more. So their managers or the owners of the company were constantly telling them that they just didn't have it in the budget to give them the raise that they felt it was worth. But on the other hand, they were going on 3 or 4 international trips a year. So they're telling their employees they can't afford to pay them more. But then by example, building a brand new house or jet setting to Italy, that sort of thing, it makes people feel like crap. So, you know, you need to lead by example. Yeah, I know you own the company, you've got your right, but I think that it makes people go, well, I'm asking for a raise because groceries are costing me $1,400 a month. And you're telling me no, I'm going to go find someone who will.
Yeah, so being very clear, making sure that you are offering fair wage. Look, Di, you were asking, how do you find that out? There are salary surveys out there. I don't know whether the association could put one together, but you're not only competing against people in log and timber. You need to look at in what kind of market are you competing against. And again, as Shawnee said, knowing what is out there is really, really important. But you're not going to compete with the mines. But people are going to get. So what do they get when they give up that? When they give that up, what are they getting? So what are they choosing when they come and work for you? That's what you need to be clear on. When you come and work for us, this is what you're choosing. You're choosing a place where you can build a skill that you can be proud of. It's like something that not many people have. It's unique. And your younger generation, they want something that's unique, that stands out, that's something that they can be proud of. It's tangible. You want to attract those people that are longing for something tangible. It's specialized. You know, it's something you can, hey, I've got this badge. Not many people, I stand out. That's part of what you're selling. So some of the stuff can be done together as an industry being clear on when you come and work for this industry, and marketing and branding, attracting people to the industry, part of the long game. And other stuff you need to look at, as for us as a unique company, what is it that attracts people to come and work here? There's lots more we can talk on, and we're out of time.
Yeah.
So hopefully this was helpful. It was fairly high level, but hoping that you leave with something. And if there are any specifics that have come up, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, I'm going now. Is it okay with you ladies if I circulate your presentations with the recording, or do you want me to? Is that all right? Okay, because yeah. So I'm going to basically take this recording and then I distribute it to everyone who was unable to attend. It gets posted on our website, all of that fun stuff. But yeah, if I can include your PowerPoints, I'll do that at the same time. And I'll put your contact information there, of course, so that people can reach out to you directly regarding everything we discussed.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Great, yeah, thanks.
Can I just add one thing here? So we were talking about sort of industry-wide support. So there is through BC Wood, which is the industry association, not just for log and timber, but all sorts of value-add wood products. As of last week, their strategic plan for workforce development has been approved by the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development. No update yet or able to officially release that information, but there is, I think, help coming. They are starting with a few pilot projects throughout multiple regions within the province, and then looking to expand it to actually starting to delivery, looking at, high school all the way to mid, career changers and people in between. So watch your inboxes, I think, for that as announcements are able to be public.
That's great.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly.
Kelly and I were both on that advisory committee. Kelly was much more active than I was, but it was a really informative process to go through on that. I just want to thank both of you, Jill and Shawnee, for a really informative session. It was great. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Watch for
Bye.
my email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.